Hey there, fellow history buffs. Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of aircraft carriers. These massive vessels have played a crucial role in military history, and we're going to explore their different types, history, description, national fleets, and even some that are preserved for future generations to appreciate. So, let's start with the types of carriers. There are three main types: the STOVL short takeoff and vertical landing carrier, the Catabar catapult-assisted takeoff but arrested recovery carrier, and the Stober short takeoff but arrested recovery carrier. Each type has its own unique features and capabilities. Now, let's delve into the history of aircraft carriers. These vessels first appear in the early 20th century and have since evolved to become the backbone of many modern navies. They've played a significant role in major conflicts and have been instrumental in shaping the course of history. Moving on to the description of aircraft carriers, these massive ships are designed to launch and recover aircraft, providing a mobile base for air operations. They're equipped with flight decks, hangars, and specialized equipment to support aircraft operations. Next, let's talk about national fleets. Many countries around the world operate aircraft carriers, each with its own unique design and capabilities. Some of the most famous carriers include the USS Enterprise, the HMS Ark Royal, and the Russian aircraft carrier Admiral Kuznetsov. Lastly, let's discuss aircraft carriers in preservation. Several carriers have been preserved for future generations to appreciate and learn from. These include the USS Yorktown, the HMS Hermes, and the USS Midway. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the fascinating world of aircraft carriers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to follow and subscribe for more historical insights. Until next time, happy exploring! An aircraft carrier is a warship that serves as a seagoing airbase, equipped with a full-length flight deck and hangar facilities for supporting, arming, deploying and recovering shipborne aircraft. One typically is the capital ship of a fleet known as a carrier battle group, as it allows a naval force to project seaborne air power far from homeland without depending on local airfields for staging aircraft operations. Since their inception in the early 20th century, aircraft carriers have evolved from wooden vessels used to deploy individual tethered reconnaissance balloons to nuclear-powered supercarriers that carry dozens of fighters, strike aircraft, military helicopters, EWNCs and other types of aircraft such as UCAVs, while heavier fixed-wing aircraft such as airlifters, gunships and bombers have been launched from aircraft carriers. These aircraft have not landed on a carrier due to flight deck limitations. The aircraft carrier, along with its onboard aircraft and defensive ancillary weapons, is the largest weapons system ever created. By their tactical prowess, mobility, autonomy, and the variety of operational means, aircraft carriers are often the centerpiece of modern naval warfare and have significant diplomatic influence in deterrence, command of the sea, and air supremacy. Since the Second World War, the aircraft carrier has replaced the battleship in the role of flagship of a fleet and largely transformed naval battles from gunfire to beyond visual range airstrikes. In addition to tactical aptitudes, it has great strategic advantages in that, by sailing in international waters, it does not need to interfere with any territorial sovereignty and thus does not risk diplomatic complications or conflict escalation due to trespassing, and obviates the need for land use authorizations from third-party countries, reduces the times and transit logistics of aircraft, and therefore significantly increases the time of availability on the combat zone. A selection of aircraft carriers, sorted by length. There is no single definition of an aircraft carrier. Citation needed, and modern navies use several variants of the type. These variants are sometimes categorized as subtypes of aircraft carriers, and sometimes as distinct types of aviation-capable ships. 3 aircraft carriers may be classified according to the type of aircraft they carry and their operational assignments. Admiral Sir Mark Stanhope, RN, former First Sea Lord Head of the Royal Navy, has said, to put it simply, countries that aspire to strategic international influence of aircraft carriers. For Henry Kissinger, while United States Secretary of State, also said, an aircraft carrier is 100,000 tons of diplomacy. 5. As of May 2025, there are 50 active aircraft carriers in the world operated by 15 navies. The United States has 11 large nuclear-powered Catabar fleet carriers, each carrying around 80 fighters, the largest in the world. with a total combined deck space over twice that of all other nations combined. 6. In addition, the U.S. Navy has 9 amphibious assault ships used primarily as helicopter carriers, although these also each carry up to 20 vertical, short takeoff and landing STOL jet fighters and are similar in size to medium-sized fleet carriers. China, the United Kingdom, and India each currently operate to STOVL aircraft carriers with ski-jump flight decks, with China in the process to commission a third carrier with catapult capabilities, and France and Russia each operate a single aircraft carrier with a capacity of 30 to 60 fighters. Italy operates to light STOL carriers, while Spain, Turkey and Iran operate 1 STOL aircraft carrying assault ship. Helicopter carriers are also operated by Japan 2 of which are being converted to operate STOL fighters, France 3, Australia 2, previously also owned 3 light carriers, Egypt 2, South Korea 2, China 3, Thailand 1, Brazil 1 and Iran 1. Future aircraft carriers are under construction or in planning by China, France, India, Italy, Russia, South Korea, Turkey and the United States. Types of carriers: French aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle Rear and U.S. Navy carrier USS Ronald Reagan conducting joint operations in the Persian Gulf, each with the Catabar configuration. General features: speed is a crucial attribute for aircraft carriers, as they need to be able to be deployed quickly anywhere in the world and have to be fast enough to evade detection and targeting from enemy forces. A high speed also increases the wind over the deck, boosting the lift available for fixed-wing aircraft to carry fuel and ammunition. To evade nuclear submarines, the carriers should have a speed of more than 30 knots 35 miles per hour, 56 kilometers per hour. Aircraft carriers are among the largest types of warships due to their need for ample deck space. An aircraft carrier must be able to perform increasingly diverse mission sets: diplomacy, power projection, quick crisis response force, land attack from the sea base for helicopter and amphibious assault forces, anti-surface warfare ASUW, defensive counter-air DCA, and humanitarian aid and disaster relief HAD are some of the missions the aircraft carrier is expected to accomplish. Traditionally, an aircraft carrier is supposed to be one ship that can perform at least power projection and sea control missions. 7. An aircraft carrier must be able to efficiently operate an air combat group. This means it should citation-needed handle fixed-wing jets as well as helicopters. This includes ships designed to support operations of short takeoff, vertical landing STOVL jets, basic types, aircraft cruiser, amphibious assault ship and subtypes, anti-submarine warfare carrier, balloon carrier and balloon tenders, escort carrier, fleet carrier, flight deck cruiser, helicopter carrier, light aircraft carrier, seaplane tender and seaplane carriers. Utility carrier. This type was mainly used in the U.S. Navy in the decade after World War II to ferry aircraft. 8. Some of the types listed here are not strictly defined as aircraft carriers by some sources. By role: USS Abraham Lincoln CVN-72, United States Navy fleet carrier, also often referred to as a supercarrier, crossing the Atlantic in 2019. A fleet carrier is intended to operate with the main fleet and usually provides an offensive capability. These are the largest carriers capable of fast speeds. By comparison, escort carriers were developed to provide defense for convoys of ships. They were smaller and slower with lower numbers of aircraft carried. Most were built from mercantile hulls or, in the case of merchant aircraft carriers, were bulk cargo ships with a flight deck added on top. Light aircraft carriers were fast enough to operate with the main fleet, but of smaller size with reduced aircraft capacity. The Soviet aircraft carrier Admiral Kuznetsov was termed a heavy aircraft carrying cruiser. This was primarily a legal construct to avoid the limitations of the Montreux Convention preventing aircraft carriers transiting the Turkish Straits between the Soviet Black Sea bases and the Mediterranean Sea. These ships, while sized in the range of large fleet carriers, were designed to deploy alone or with escorts. In addition to supporting fighter aircraft and helicopters, they provide both strong defensive weaponry and heavy offensive missiles equivalent to a guided missile cruiser. By configuration, aircraft carriers in the STOVL configuration are in service with Italy, Spain, Thailand and the United Kingdom. Aircraft carriers today are usually divided into the following four categories based on the way that aircraft take off and land. Catapult-assisted takeoff, barrier-arrested recovery, catabar. These carriers generally carry the largest, heaviest, and most heavily armed aircraft, although smaller catabar carriers may have other limitations, weight capacity of aircraft, elevator, etc. All catabar carriers in service today are nuclear power, as the last conventionally powered catabar carrier USS Kitty Hawk was decommissioned in 2009. 12 are in service, 10 Nimitz-class and 1 Gerald R-4-class fleet carriers in the United States, and the Charles de Gaulle in France. Short takeoff, barrier-arrested recovery, STOBR. These carriers are generally limited to carrying lighter fixed-wing aircraft with more limited payloads. STOBR carrier air wings, such as the Sukhoi Su-33 and future Mikoyan IG-9K wings of Admiral Kuznetsov, are often geared primarily towards air superiority and fleet defense roles rather than strike power projection tasks. Citation needed, which require heavier payloads, bombs and air-to-ground missiles. 5 are in service, 2 in China, 2 in India, and 1 in Russia. Short takeoff, vertical landing, STOVL. Limited to carrying STOVL aircraft. STOVL aircraft, such as the Harrier family and Yakovlev Yak-38, generally have limited payloads, lower performance, and high fuel consumption when compared with conventional fixed-wing aircraft. However, a new generation of STOVL aircraft, currently consisting of the Lockheed Martin F-35B Lightning II, has much improved performance. 14 are in service, 9 STOVL amphibious assault ships in the U.S. to carriers each in Italy and the UK, and 1 STOVL amphibious assault ship in Spain. Helicopter carrier. Helicopter carriers have a similar appearance to other aircraft carriers, but operate only helicopters. Those that mainly operate helicopters, but can also operate fixed-wing aircraft, are known as STOVL carriers. See above. 17 are in service, 4 in Japan, 3 in France, 2 each in Australia, China, Egypt and South Korea, and 1 each in Brazil and Thailand. In the past, some conventional carriers were converted, and these were called commando carriers by the Royal Navy. Some helicopter carriers, but not all, are classified as amphibious assault ships, tasked with landing and supporting ground forces on enemy territory. By size: fleet carrier, light aircraft carrier, escort carrier, supercarrier redirects here. For the television series, see Supercarrier TV series. The Royal Navy's HMS Ark Royal in 1939, with Swordfish biplane bombers passing overhead. The British aircraft carrier was involved in the crippling of the German battleship Bismarck in May 1941. The appellation supercarrier is not an official designation with any national navy, but a term used predominantly by the media and typically when reporting on larger and more advanced carrier types. It is also used when comparing carriers of various sizes and capabilities, both current and past. It was first used by the New York Times in 1938, in an article about the Royal Navy's HMS Ark Royal that had a length of 800 feet, 244 meters, a displacement of 22,000 tons, and was designed to carry 72 aircraft. 11 since then. Aircraft carriers have consistently grown in size, both in length and displacement, as well as improved capabilities in defense, sensors, electronic warfare, propulsion, range, launch and recovery systems, number and types of aircraft carried and number of sorties flown per day. 12. Both China Type 003 and the United Kingdom Queen Elizabeth class have carriers undergoing trials or in service with full load displacements between 80,013 to 85,000 tons. 14. And lengths from 280 to 320 meters, 920 to 1,050 feet. 15. 16, which are described as supercarriers. 17. France is also developing a new aircraft carrier Pang, which is to have a full load displacement of 75,000 tons and also be considered a supercarrier. Citation needed. The largest supercarriers in service as of 2024, however, are with the U.S. Navy. 19 with full load displacements in excess 100,000 tons. 19 lengths of over 337 meters, 1,106 feet. 19 and capabilities that exceed those of any other class. 25. Hull type identification symbols. Several systems of identification symbol for aircraft carriers and related types of ship have been used. These include the pennant numbers used by the Royal Navy, Commonwealth countries, and Europe, along with the hull classification symbols used by the US and Canada. 26. U.S. hull classification symbols for aircraft carriers and related ship. Generic aircraft carrier. CVA attack carrier up to 1975. CVB large aircraft carrier retired, 1952. CVAN nuclear-powered attack carrier, CVE escort carrier. CVA aircraft carrier, helicopter assault retire. CVHE aircraft carrier, helicopter, escort retired. CVV aircraft carrier medium proposed. CVL light aircraft carrier, CVN nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. CVS anti-submarine warfare carrier. CVT training aircraft carrier, CVU utility carrier retired. LAW landing helicopter assault, a type of amphibious assault ship. LHD landing helicopter dock, a type of amphibious assault ship. LPH landing platform helicopter, a type of amphibious assault ship. History. Main articles. History of the aircraft carrier and timeline for aircraft carrier service. Origins. The Wakamiya conducted the world's first naval-launched air raids in 1914. The 1903 advent of the heavier-than-air fixed-wing airplane with the Wright brothers' first flight at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, was followed on the 14th of November 1910 by Eugene Burton Ely's first experimental takeoff of a Curtiss pusher airplane from the deck of a United States Navy ship, the cruiser USS Birmingham, anchored off Norfolk Navy Base in Virginia. 2 months later, on the 18th of January 1911, Ely landed his Curtiss pusher airplane on a platform on the armored cruiser USS Pennsylvania, anchored in San Francisco Bay. On the 9th of May 1912, the first takeoff of an airplane from a ship, while underway, was made by Commander Charles Sampson flying a short improved S-27 biplane, S-38 of the Royal Naval Air Service, RNAS, from the deck of the Royal Navy's pre-dreadnought battleship, HMS Hibernia, thus providing the first practical demonstration of the aircraft carrier for naval operations at sea. 27-28 seaplane tender support ships came next, with the French Foudre of 1911. Early in World War I, the Imperial Japanese Navy ship Wakamiya conducted the world's first carrier launch air raid. 29 On the 6th of September 1914, the Wakamiya used its crane to lower Farman seaplanes into the water. The Wakamiya attacked the Austro-Hungarian cruiser SMS Kaiserin Elizabeth and the Imperial German gunboat Jaguar in Jiaozhou Bay off Qingdao. Neither was hit. 30. The first attack using an air-launched torpedo occurred on the 2nd of August, when a torpedo was fired by Flight Commander Charles Edmonds from a short Type 184 seaplane, launched from the seaplane carrier HMS Ben Micree. 31-32. The first carrier launch airstrike was the Tondern raid in July 1918. 7 Sopwith Camels were launched from the battlecruiser HMS Furious, which had been completed as a carrier by replacing her planned forward turret with a flight deck and hangar prior to commissioning. The Camels attacked and damaged the German airbase at Tondern, Germany, modern-day Tunder, Denmark, and destroyed two Zeppelin airships. 33. The first landing of an airplane on a moving ship was by Squadron Commander Edwin Harris Dunning, when he landed his Sopwith pup on HMS Furious in Scapa Flow, Orkney on the 2nd of August 1917. Landing on the forward flight deck required the pilot to approach round the ship's superstructure, a difficult and dangerous maneuver, and Dunning was later killed when his airplane was thrown overboard while attempting another landing on Furious. 34. HMS Furious was modified again when her rear turret was removed and another flight deck added over a second hangar for landing aircraft over the stern. 35. Her funnel and superstructure remained intact, however, and turbulence from the funnel and superstructure was severe enough that only 3 landing attempts were successful before further attempts were forbidden. 36. This experience prompted the development of vessels with a flush deck and produced the first large fleet ships. In 1918, HMS Argus became the world's first carrier capable of launching and recovering naval aircraft. 37. As a result of the Washington Naval Treaty of 1922, which limited the construction of new heavy surface combat ships, most early aircraft carriers were conversions of ships that were laid down or had served as different ship types: cargo ships, cruisers, battlecruisers, or battleships. These conversions gave rise to the USS Langley in 1922, the U.S. Lexington-class aircraft carriers 1927, Japanese Akagi and Kaga and British Courageous class, of which Furious was one. Specialist carrier evolution was well underway, with several navies ordering and building warships that were purposefully designed to function as aircraft carriers by the mid-1920s. This resulted in the commissioning of ships such as the Japanese Honshu 1922, 38 HMS Hermes 1924, although laid down in 1918 before Honshu, and Bern 1927. During World War II, these ships would become known as fleet carriers. Citation needed. World War II. See also, List of aircraft carriers of World War II. USS Enterprise, the most decorated U.S. warship of World War II. The Japanese carrier Shinano was built on a battleship hull to carry spare aircraft and ordnance in support of other carriers. En route to complete fitting out, it was sunk by an American submarine. 39. The aircraft carrier dramatically changed naval warfare in World War II because air power was becoming a significant factor in warfare. The advent of aircraft as focal weapons was driven by the superior range, flexibility, and effectiveness of carrier-launched aircraft. They had greater range and precision than naval guns, making them highly effective. The versatility of the carrier was demonstrated in November 1940, when HMS Illustrious launched a long-range strike on the Italian fleet at their base in Taranto, signaling the beginning of the effective and highly mobile aircraft strikes. This operation in the shallow water harbor incapacitated 3 of the 6 anchored battleships at a cost of 2 torpedo bombers. World War II in the Pacific Ocean involved clashes between aircraft carrier fleets. The Japanese surprise attack on the American Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor Naval and Air Bases on Sunday, the 7th of December 1941, was a clear illustration of the power projection capability afforded by a large force of modern carriers. Concentrating 6 carriers in a single unit turned naval history about, as no other nation had fielded anything comparable. In the Doolittle raid, on the 18th of April 1942, the U.S. Navy carrier USS Hornet sailed to within 650 nautical miles 1,200 kilometers of Japan and launched 16 B-5 Mitchell medium bombers from her deck in a demonstrative retaliatory strike on the mainland, including the capital, Tokyo. However, the vulnerability of carriers compared to traditional capital ships was illustrated by the sinking of HMS Glorious by German battleships during the Norwegian campaign in 1940. This newfound importance of naval aviation forced nations to create a number of carriers in efforts to provide air superiority cover for every major fleet to ward off enemy aircraft. This extensive usage led to the development and construction of light carriers. Escort aircraft carriers, such as USS Bogue, were sometimes purpose-built, but most were converted from merchant ships as a stopgap measure to provide anti-submarine air support for convoys and amphibious invasions. Following this concept, light aircraft carriers built by the U.S., such as USS Independence, commissioned in 1943, represented a larger, more militarized version of the escort carrier. Although with similar complement to escort carriers, they had the advantage of speed from their converted cruiser hulls. The UK 1940 to design light fleet carrier was designed for building quickly by civilian shipyards and with an expected service life of about 3 years, 40. They served the Royal Navy during the war, and the hull design was chosen for nearly all aircraft carrier-equipped navies after the war, until the 1980s. Emergencies also spurred the creation or conversion of highly unconventional aircraft carriers. Ships were cargo-carrying merchant ships that could launch, but not retrieve a single fighter aircraft from a catapult to defend the convoy from long-range land-based German aircraft. Post-war era, an F-6 F-5 landing on the French air Manches in the Tonkin Gulf, 1953. USS Tripoli, a U.S. Navy Iwo Jima-class helicopter carrier. USS Enterprise CVN-65, the world's first nuclear-powered carrier, commissioned in 1961. Before World War II, international naval treaties of 1922, 1930, and 1936 limited the size of capital ships, including carriers. Since World War II, aircraft carrier designs have increased in size to accommodate a steady increase in aircraft size. The large, modern Nimitz class of U.S. Navy carriers has a displacement nearly 4 times that of the World War II-era USS Enterprise. Yet its complement of aircraft is roughly the same, a consequence of the steadily increasing size and weight of individual military aircraft over the years. Today's aircraft carriers are so expensive that some nations, which operate them, risk significant economic and military impact if a carrier is lost. 41. Fighting the fire on board USS Forrestal, 1967. Some changes were made after 1945 VIN carriers. The angled flight deck was invented by Royal Navy Captain later Rear Admiral Dennis Campbell, as naval aviation jets' higher speeds required carriers be modified to fit their needs. 40 to 4340 for additionally, the angled flight deck allows for simultaneous launch and recovery. Jet blast deflectors became necessary to protect aircraft and handlers from jet blast. The first U.S. Navy carriers to be fitted with them were the wooden-decked Essex-class aircraft carriers, which were adapted to operate jets in the late 1940s. Later versions had to be water-cooled because of increasing engine power. 45. Optical landing systems were developed to facilitate the very precise landing angles required by jet aircraft, which have a faster landing speed, giving the pilot little time to correct misalignments or mistakes. The first system was fitted to HMS Illustrious in 1952. 45. Aircraft carrier designs have increased in size to accommodate continuous increase in aircraft size. The 1950s saw U.S. Navy's commission of supercarriers, designed to operate naval jets, which offered better performance at the expense of bigger size and demanded more ordnance to be carried on board, fuel, spare parts, electronics, etc. The combination of increased carrier size, speed requirements above 30 knots 35 miles per hour, 56 kilometers per hour, and a requirement to operate at sea for long periods mean that modern large aircraft carriers often use nuclear reactors to create power for propulsion, electricity, catapulting airplanes from aircraft carriers, and a few more minor uses. 46. Modern navies that operate such aircraft carriers treat them as capital ships of fleets, a role previously held by the galleons, ships of the line, and battleships. This change took place during World War II in response to air power becoming a significant factor in warfare, driven by the superior range, flexibility, and effectiveness of carrier-launched aircraft. Following the war, carrier operations continued to increase in size and importance, and along with carrier designs also increased in size and ability. Some of these larger carriers, dubbed by the media as supercarriers, displacing 75,000 tons or greater, have become the pinnacle of carrier development. Some are powered by nuclear reactors and form the core of a fleet designed to operate far from home. Amphibious assault ships, such as the Wasp and Mistral classes, serve the purpose of carrying and landing Marines, and operate a large contingent of helicopters for that purpose. Also known as commando carriers 47 or helicopter carriers, many have the capability to operate VSTOL aircraft. The threatening role of aircraft carriers has a place in modern asymmetric warfare, like the gunboat diplomacy of the past. Citation needed. Carriers also facilitate quick and precise projections of overwhelming military power into such local and regional conflicts. 48. Lacking the firepower of other warships, carriers by themselves are considered vulnerable to attack by other ships, aircraft, submarines, or missiles. Therefore, an aircraft carrier is generally accompanied by a number of other ships to provide protection for the relatively unwieldy carrier. To carry supplies, resupply. Many carriers are self-sufficient and will supply their escorts and perform other support services, and to provide additional offensive capabilities. The resulting group of ships is often termed a carrier strike group, battle group, carrier group, or carrier battle group. There is a view among some military pundits that modern anti-ship weapon systems, such as torpedoes and missiles, or even ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads, have made aircraft carriers and carrier groups too vulnerable for modern combat. 49. Carriers can also be vulnerable to diesel-electric submarines like the German U-24 of the conventional 206 class, which in 2001 fired at the Enterprise during the exercise JTFEX-12 in the Caribbean Sea, by firing flares and taking a photograph through its periscope. 50, or the Swedish Gotland, which managed the same feat in 2006 during JTFEX-06 by penetrating the defensive measures of Carrier Strike Group 7, which was protecting USS Ronald Reagan. 51. Structure. carriers are large and long ships, although there is a high degree of variation depending on their intended role and aircraft complement. The size of the carrier has varied over history and among navies to cater to the various roles that global climates have demanded from naval aviation. Regardless of size, the ship itself must house their complement of aircraft, with space for launching, storing, and maintaining them. Space is also required for the large crew, supplies food, munitions, fuel, engineering parts, and propulsion. U.S. aircraft carriers are notable for having nuclear reactors powering their systems and propulsion. The first carrier landing and takeoff of a jet aircraft, Eric Winkle Brown landing on HMS Ocean in 1945. The top of the carrier is the flight deck, where aircraft are launched and recovered. On the starboard side of this is the island, where the funnel, air traffic control, and the bridge are located. The constraints of constructing a flight deck affect the role of a given carrier strongly, as they influence the weight, type, and configuration of the aircraft that may be launched. For example, assisted launch mechanisms are used primarily for heavy aircraft, especially those loaded with air-to-ground weapons. Catabar is most commonly used on U.S. Navy fleet carriers as it allows the deployment of heavy jets with full loadouts, especially on ground attack missions. STOVL is used by other navies because it is cheaper to operate and still provides good deployment capability for fighter aircraft. Due to the busy nature of the flight deck, only 20 or so aircraft may be on it at any one time. A hangar storage several decks below the flight deck is where most aircraft are kept, and aircraft are taken from the lower storage decks to the flight deck through the use of an elevator. The hangar is usually quite large and can take up several decks of vertical space. 52. Munitions are commonly stored on the lower decks because they are highly explosive. Usually this is below the waterline so that the area can be flooded in case of emergency. Flight deck. Main article. Flight deck. Catapult launches aboard USS Ronald Reagan. As runways at sea, aircraft carriers have a flat-top flight deck, which launches and recovers aircraft. Aircraft launch forward, into the wind, and are recovered from astern. The flight deck is where the most notable differences between a carrier and a land runway are found. Creating such a surface at sea poses constraints on the carrier. For example, the size of the vessel is a fundamental limitation on runway length. This affects takeoff procedure, as a shorter runway length of the deck requires that aircraft accelerate more quickly to gain lift. This either requires a thrust boost, a vertical component to its velocity, or reduced takeoff load to lower mass. The differing types of deck configuration, as above, influence the structure of the flight deck. The form of launch assistance a carrier provides is strongly related to the types of aircraft embarked and the design of the carrier itself. There are two main philosophies to keep the deck short: add thrust to the aircraft, such as using a catapult-assisted takeoff (CATO), and changing the direction of the airplane's thrust, as in vertical land, or short takeoff (STO). Each method has advantages and disadvantages of its own. Catapult-assisted takeoff barrier-arrested recovery catabar, a steam or electric-powered catapult is connected to the aircraft and is used to accelerate conventional aircraft to a safe flying speed. By the end of the catapult stroke, the aircraft is airborne and further propulsion is provided by its own engines. This is the most expensive method as it requires complex machinery to be installed under the flight deck, but allows for even heavily loaded aircraft to take off. Short takeoff barrier-arrested recovery starboard depends on increasing the net lift on the aircraft. Aircraft do not require catapult assistance for takeoff. Instead, on nearly all ships of this type, an upwards vector is provided by a ski jump at the forward end of the flight deck, often combined with thrust vectoring by the aircraft. Alternatively, by reducing the fuel and weapon load, an aircraft is able to reach faster speeds and generate more upwards lift and launch without a ski jump or catapult. Short takeoff vertical landing STOVL. On aircraft carriers, non-catapult assisted, fixed-wing short takeoffs are accomplished with the use of thrust vectoring, which may also be used in conjunction with a runway ski jump. Use of STOVL tends to allow aircraft to carry a larger payload as compared to during VTOL use, while still only requiring a short runway. The most famous examples are the Hawker Siddeley Harrier and the BAEC Harrier. Although technically VTOL aircraft, they are operationally STOVL aircraft due to the extra weight carried at takeoff for fuel and armaments. The same is true of the Lockheed F-35B Lightning II, which demonstrated VTOL capability in test flights, but is operationally STOVL, or in the case of UK uses shipborne rolling vertical landing, vertical takeoff and landing VTOL. Certain aircraft are specifically designed for the purpose of using very high degrees of thrust vectoring. For example, if the thrust-to-weight force ratio is greater than 1, it can take off vertically, but are usually slower than conventionally propelled aircraft due to the additional weight from associated systems. On the recovery side of the flight deck, the adaptation to the aircraft loadout is mirrored. Non-VTOL or conventional aircraft cannot decelerate on their own, and almost all carriers using them must have arrested recovery systems, BAR, for example catabar or stober, to recover their aircraft. Aircraft that are landing extend a tailhook that catches on arrestor wires stretched across the deck to bring themselves to a stop in a short distance. Post-World War II Royal Navy research on safer catabar recovery eventually led to universal adoption of a landing area angled off axis to allow aircraft who miss the arresting wires to bolt and safely return to flight for another landing attempt rather than crashing into aircraft on the forward deck. 53. If the aircraft are VTOL capable, or helicopters, they do not need to decelerate, and hence there is no such need. The arrested recovery system has used an angled deck since the 1950s because, in case the aircraft does not catch the arresting wire, the short deck allows easier takeoff by reducing the number of objects between the aircraft and the end of the runway. It also has the advantage of separating the recovery operation area from the launch area. Helicopters and aircraft capable of vertical or short takeoff and landing VTOL usually recover by coming abreast of the carrier on the port side, and then using their hover capability to move over the flight deck and land vertically without the need for arresting gear. Staff and deck operations, F-18 Hornet aircraft landing video. Carriers steam at speed, up to 35 knots 65 kilometers per hour. 40 miles per hour into the wind during flight deck operations to increase wind speed over the deck to a safe minimum. Wind speed provides a higher launch airspeed for aircraft at the end of the catapult stroke or ski jump, as well as making recovery safer by reducing the difference between the relative speeds of the aircraft and ship. Since the early 1950s on conventional carriers, it has been the practice to recover aircraft at an angle to port of the axial line of the ship. The primary function of this angled deck is to allow aircraft that miss the arresting wires, referred to as a bolter, to become airborne again without the risk of hitting aircraft parked forward. The angled deck allows the installation of 1 or 2 waist catapults in addition to the 2 bow cats. An angled deck also improves launch and recovery cycle flexibility with the option of simultaneous launching and recovery of aircraft. Conventional tailhook aircraft rely upon a landing signal officer LSO, radio call sign paddles to monitor the aircraft's approach, visually gauge glide slope, attitude, and airspeed, and transmit that data to the pilot. Before the angled deck emerged in the 1950s, LSOs used colored paddles to signal corrections to the pilot, hence the nickname. From the late 1950s onward, visual landing aids such as the optical landing system have provided information on proper glide slope, but LSOs still transmit voice calls to approaching pilots by radio. Key personnel involved in the flight deck include the shooters, the handler, and the air boss. Shooters are naval aviators or naval flight officers and are responsible for launching aircraft. The handler works just inside the island from the flight deck and is responsible for the movement of aircraft before launching and after recovery. The air boss, usually a commander, occupies the top bridge primary flight control, also called primary or the tower, and has the overall responsibility for controlling launch, recovery, and those aircraft in the air near the ship, and the movement of planes on the flight deck, which itself resembles a well-choreographed ballet. 54. The captain of the ship spends most of his time one level below primary on the navigation bridge. Below this is the flag bridge, designated for the embarked admiral and his staff. To facilitate working on the flight deck of a U.S. aircraft carrier, the sailors wear colored shirts that designate their responsibilities. There are at least 7 different colors worn by flight deck personnel for modern United States Navy carrier air operations. Carrier operations of other nations use similar color schemes. Deck structures: island control structure of USS Enterprise. The command bridge of the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle. The superstructure of a carrier, such as the bridge, flight control tower, are concentrated in a relatively small area called an island, a feature pioneered on HMS Hermes in 1923. While the island is usually built on the starboard side of the flight deck, The Japanese aircraft carriers Akagi and Hiryu had their islands built on the port side. Very few carriers have been designed or built without an island. The flush deck configuration proved to have significant drawbacks, primary of which was management of the exhaust from the power plant. Fumes coming across the deck were a major issue in USS Langley. In addition, lack of an island meant difficulties managing the flight deck, performing air traffic control, a lack of radar housing placements, and problems with navigating and controlling the ship itself. 55. Another deck structure that can be seen is a ski jump ramp at the forward end of the flight deck. This was first developed to help launch short takeoff vertical landing STOVL aircraft takeoff at far higher weights than is possible with a vertical or rolling takeoff on flat decks. Originally developed by the Royal Navy, it since has been adopted by many navies for smaller carriers. A ski jump ramp works by converting some of the forward rolling movement of the aircraft into vertical velocity and is sometimes combined with the aiming of jet thrust partly downward. This allows heavily loaded and fueled aircraft a few more precious seconds to attain sufficient air velocity and lift to sustain normal flight. Without a ski jump, launching fully loaded and fueled aircraft such as the Harrier would not be possible on a smaller flat deck ship before either stalling out or crashing directly into the sea. Although STOVL aircraft are capable of taking off vertically from a spot on the deck, using the ramp and a running start is far more fuel efficient and permits a heavier launch weight. As catapults are unnecessary, carriers with this arrangement reduce weight, complexity, and space needed for complex steam or electromagnetic launching equipment. Vertical landing aircraft also remove the need for arresting cables and related hardware. Russian, Chinese, and Indian carriers include a ski jump ramp for launching lightly loaded conventional fighter aircraft but recover using traditional carrier arresting cables and a tailhook on their aircraft. The disadvantage of the ski jump is the penalty it exacts on aircraft size, payload, and fuel load and thus range. Heavily laden aircraft cannot launch using a ski jump because their high loaded weight requires either a longer takeoff roll than is possible on a carrier deck or assistance from a catapult or JATO rocket. For example, the Russian Sukhoi Su-33 is only able to launch from the carrier Admiral Kuznetsov with a minimal armament and fuel load. Another disadvantage is on mixed flight deck operations, where helicopters are also present, such as on a U.S. landing helicopter dock or landing helicopter assault amphibious assault ship. A ski jump is not included as this would eliminate one or more helicopter landing areas. This flat deck limits the loading of Harriers, that is somewhat mitigated by the longer rolling start provided by a long flight deck compared to many STOVL carriers. National fleets. See also, List of aircraft carriers by country and List of aircraft carriers in service. Countries currently operating fixed-wing aircraft carriers 10. Countries currently solely operating helicopter carriers 6. Countries that have operated carriers in the past but no longer do so 3. The U.S. Navy has the largest fleet of carriers in the world, with 11 super carriers in service as of 2024. China and India each have STOVL carriers in service. The UK has STOVL carriers in service. The navies of France and Russia each operate a single medium-sized carrier, A. The US also has 9 similarly sized amphibious warfare ships. There are 5 small light carriers used capable of operating both fixed-wing aircraft and helicopters. Japan and Italy each operate 2, and Spain 1. Additionally, there are 19 small carriers, which only operate helicopters serving the navies of Australia 2, Brazil 1, China 2, Egypt 2, France 3, Japan 4, South Korea 2, Thailand 1, Turkey 1, and Iran 1. Citation needed. Algeria, current, Kulat Deni ABBSL for 7 is an amphibious transport Dock 56 of the Algerian National Navy with 2 deck landing spots for helicopters. Australia, HMAS Canberra, a Canberra-class landing helicopter dock, current. The Royal Australian Navy operates 2 Canberra-class landing helicopter docks. The 2-ship class, based on the Spanish vessel Juan Carlos I and built by Navantia and Base Systems Australia, represents the largest ships ever built for the Royal Australian Navy. 57. HMAS Canberra underwent sea trials in late 2013 and was commissioned in 2014. Her sister ship, HMAS Adelaide, was commissioned in December 2015. The Australian ships retain the ski ramp from the Juan Carlos I design. although the RAN has not acquired carrier-based fixed-wing aircraft. Brazil. Current. In December 2017, the Brazilian Navy confirmed the purchase of HMS Ocean for GBP £84.6 million equivalent to 359.5 million reals and 113.2 million United States dollars and renamed her Atlantico. The ship was decommissioned from Royal Navy service in March 2018. The Brazilian Navy commissioned and the carrier on the 29th of June 2018 in the United Kingdom. After undertaking a period of maintenance in the UK, the ship traveled to its new home port, Arsenal de Marinho do Rio de Janeiro AMRJ, to be fully operational by 2020. 585960. The ship displaces 21,578 tons, is 203.43 meters, 667.4 feet long, and has a range of 8,000 nautical miles, 15,000 kilometers, 9,200 miles, 6162. Before leaving HM Manby Devonport for her new home port in Rio's MRJ, Atlantico underwent operational sea training under the Royal Navy's Flag Officer Sea Training FOST program 6364. On the 12th of November 2020, Atlantico was redesignated NAM for Multipurpose Aircraft Carrier Portuguese, Navio Aerodromo Multipropósito, from PHN, for Multipurpose Helicopter Carrier Portuguese, Porta Helicópteros Multipropósito, to reflect the ship's capability to operate with fixed-wing medium-altitude long-endurance unmanned aerial vehicles, as well as crewed tiltrotor VTOL aircraft. 65. China, Shandong, a Type 002 aircraft carrier. Main article: Chinese aircraft carrier program, current, to Stober carriers. Liaoning 60,900 tons was originally built as the uncompleted Soviet Kuznetsov-class carrier Varyag 66 and was later purchased as a hulk from Ukraine in 1998 on a pretext of commercial use as a floating casino. Then towed to China for rebuild and completion, 67 Liaoning was commissioned on the 25th of September 2012 and began service for testing and training. 68. In November 2012, Liaoning launched and recovered Shenyang J-15 naval fighter aircraft for the first time. 6970. After a refit in January 2019, she was assigned to the North Sea Fleet, a change from her previous role as a training ship. Shandong 70,000 tons was launched on the 26th of April 2017. The first to be built domestically based on an improved Kuznetsov-class design. Shandong started sea trials on the 23rd of April 2018, 71 and entered service in December 2019, 72. One Katabar carrier. Fujian 80,000 tons is a conventionally powered Katabar carrier that was under construction between 2015 and 2016 before being completed in June 2022. 73. She is being fitted out as of 2022 and will commence service in 2023 to 2024. 70 for 75. 76. 3 LHD amphibious assault ships, a Type 075 LHD, Hainan was commissioned on the 23rd of April 2021 at the South Sea Fleet Naval Base in Sanya. 77. A second ship, Guangxi, was commissioned on the 26th of December 2021. 78. And a third ship, Anhui, was commissioned in October 2022. 79. Future. China has had a long-term plan to operate 6 large aircraft carriers with 2 carriers per fleet. 80. China is planning a class of 8 LHD vessels, the Type 075 NATO reporting name Yushan-class landing helicopter assault. This is a class of amphibious assault ship under construction by the Hedong Zhonghua Shipbuilding Company. 77. The first ship was commissioned in April 2021. 77. China is also planning a modified class of the same concept, the Type 076 landing helicopter dock, that will be equipped with an electromagnetic catapult system. 81. And will likely support launching unmanned combat aerial vehicles. Egypt. Current. Egypt signed a contract with French shipbuilder DCNS to buy 2 Mistral-class helicopter carriers for approximately €950 million. The 2 ships were originally to be sold to Russia, but the deal was cancelled by France due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2014. 82. On the 2nd of June 2016, Egypt received the first of 2 helicopter carriers acquired in October 2015. The landing helicopter dock Gamal Abdel Nasser. The flag transfer ceremony took place in the presence of Egyptian and French Navy's chiefs of staff, Chairman and Chief Executive Officers of both DCNS and STX France, and senior Egyptian and French officials, 83. On the 16th of September 2016, DCNS delivered the second of two helicopter carriers. The landing helicopter Dock Anwar El Sadat, which also participated in a joint military exercise with the French Navy before arriving at her home port of Alexandria, 84. France, the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle of the French Navy. Current, the French Navy operates the 42,000-ton nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, Charles de Gaulle. Commissioned in 2001, she is the flagship of the French Navy. The ship carries a complement of Dassault Rafale N and E-2C Hawkeye aircraft, EC-7-5 Caracal and AS-532 Cougar helicopters for combat search and rescue, as well as modern electronics and Astra missiles. She is a Catabar-type carrier that uses to 75 meters C-13-3 steam catapults of a shorter version of the catapult system installed on the U.S. Nimitz-class carriers, one catapult at the bow and one across the front of the landing area. Citation needed. In addition, the French Navy operates 3 Mistral-class landing helicopter docks, 85, future. In October 2018, the French Ministry of Defense began an 18-month, €40 million study for the replacement of the French aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle sometime after 2030. In December 2020, President Macron announced that construction of the next-generation carrier would begin in around 2025 with sea trials to start in about 2036. The carrier is planned to have a displacement of around 75,000 tons and to carry about 32 next-generation fighters, to 2-3-2D advanced Hawkeyes and a yet-to-be-determined number of unmanned carrier air vehicles, 86. India, INS Vikrant IAC-1 at sea during her maiden sea trials. Current, 2 Stober carriers, INS Vikramaditya, 45,400 tons, modified Kiev class. The carrier was purchased by India on the 20th of January 2000 after years of negotiations at a final price of $2.35 billion equivalent to $3,147 million in 2023. The ship successfully completed her sea trials in July 2013 and aviation trials in September 2013. She was formally commissioned on the 16th of November 2013 at a ceremony held at Severodvinsk, Russia, 87. INS Vikrant, also known as Indigenous Aircraft Carrier 1 IAC-1, a 45,000-ton, 262-meter-long, 860 feet, 88 aircraft carrier whose keel was laid in 2009. 89. The new carrier will operate MiG-9K and Naval HAL Tejas aircraft. 89. The ship is powered by gas turbines and has a range of 8,000 nautical miles, 15,000 kilometers, and deploys 10 helicopters and 30 aircraft. 90. The ship was launched in 2013. Sea trials began in August 2021 and was commissioned on the 2nd of September 2022. 91-92. Future. India has plans for a third carrier, INS Vishal, also known as Indigenous Aircraft Carrier 2 IAC-2 with a displacement of over 65,000 tons and is planned with a Catabar system to launch and recover heavier aircraft. 93. India has also issued a request for information RFI to procure for landing helicopter dock displacing 30,040,000 tons with a capacity to operate 12 medium-lift special ops and to heavy-lift helicopters and troops for amphibious operations. 94. Italy. Italian aircraft current, 1 STOVL carrier, Cavour. 30,000-ton Italian STOVL carrier designed and built with secondary amphibious assault facilities, commissioned in 2008. 95. Future. Italian LHD Trieste L 9890. Italy plans to replace the now decommissioned aircraft carrier Giuseppe Garibaldi, as well as one of the San Giorgio-class landing helicopter docks, with a new amphibious assault ship, to be named Trieste. 96-97. The ship will be significantly larger than her predecessors, with a displacement of 38,000 tons at full load. Trieste is to carry the F-35B Joint Strike Fighter. 98-99. Meanwhile, Giuseppe Garibaldi will be transferred to Italian Space Operation Command for use as a satellite launch platform. 100. Japan. Helicopter carrier Izuma DDH-183 at sea. Current. 2 Izuma-class multi-purpose destroyers -250-meter long, 820 feet, 19,500 ton 27,000 tons full load. STOVL carrier Izuma was launched August 2013 and commissioned March 2015. Izumo's sister ship, Kago, was commissioned in 2017. In December 2018, the Japanese cabinet gave approval to convert both Izuma-class destroyers into aircraft carriers for F-35B STOVL operations. 103. The conversion of Izuma was underway as of mid-2020. 104. The modification of maritime escort vessels is to increase operational flexibility and enhance Pacific air defense. 105. 106. The Japanese Defense Ministry's position is we are not creating carrier air wings or carrier air squadrons similar to the U.S. Navy. Citation needed. The Japanese STOVL F-35s, when delivered, will be operated by the Japan Air Self-Defense Force from land bases. According to the 2020 Japanese Defense Ministry white paper, the STOVL model was chosen for the JSDF due to the lack of appropriately long runways to support air superiority capability across all Japanese airspace. 107-108 Japan has requested that the USMC deploy STOVL F-35s and crews aboard the Izuma-class ships for cooperation and advice on how to operate the fighter on the deck of the modified ships. 109-105. On the 3rd of October 2021, USMC F-35BS performed the first vertical landings and horizontal takeoffs from JS Izuma, marking 75 years since fixed-wing aircraft operated from a Japanese carrier. 110. Current 1 STOB air carrier. Admiral Flota Sovetskogo Soyuza Kuznetsov, 55,000-ton Kuznetsov-class Stober aircraft carrier. Launched in 1985, Tbilisi, renamed and operational from 1995. Without catapults, she can launch and recover lightly fueled naval fighters for air defense or anti-ship missions, but not heavy conventional bombing strikes. Citation needed. Officially designated an aircraft carrying cruiser, she is unique in carrying a heavy cruiser's complement of defensive weapons and large P-7O Granite offensive missiles. The P-7-112 systems will be removed in the coming refit to enlarge her below-decks aviation facilities, as well as upgrading her defensive systems. 113. The ship has been out of service and in repairs since 2018. The current projection is that repairs will be completed and the ship will be transferred back to the Russian Navy sometime in 2024. However, this may be pushed back to 2025 if issues arise during overhaul and testing. 114-115. Future. The Russian government has been considering the potential replacement of Admiral Kuznetsov for some time, and has considered the Storm-class aircraft carrier as a possible option. This carrier will be a hybrid of Katabar and Stober, given the fact that she uses both systems of launching aircraft. The carrier is expected to cost between $1.8 billion and $5.63 billion. Clarification needed. 116. As of 2020, the project had not yet been approved and, given the financial costs, it was unclear whether it would be made a priority over other elements of Russian naval modernization. A class of 2 LHD, Project 23900 is planned, and an official keel-laying ceremony for the project happened on the 20th of July 2020. 117. South Korea. Conceptual model of CVX-class aircraft carrier, current. Tudokdo-class 18,860-ton full-deck amphibious assault ships with hospital and well-deckhand facilities to serve as fleet flagships. Future. South Korea has set tentative plans for procuring two light aircraft carriers by 2033, which would help make the ROK in a blue water navy. 118-119. In December 2020, details of South Korea's planned carrier program CVX were finalized. A vessel of about 40,000 tons is envisaged carrying about 20 F-35B fighters, as well as future maritime attack helicopters. Service entry had been anticipated in the early 2030s. 120. The program has encountered opposition in the National Assembly. In November 2021, the National Defense Committee of the National Assembly reduced the program's requested budget of 7.2 billion Korean won and to just 500 million Korean won, about $400,000 USD, effectively putting the project on hold, at least temporarily. 121. However, on the 3rd of December 2021, the full budget of 7.2 billion won was passed by the National Assembly. 118. Basic design work is to begin in earnest starting 2022. 122. Spain. Spanish Juan Carlos I with Harrier II. Current Juan Carlos I, a 27,000-ton, specially designed multipurpose strategic projection ship, which can operate as an amphibious assault ship and as an aircraft carrier. Juan Carlos has full facilities for both functions, including a ski jump for STOVL operations, is equipped with the Aviate-B Harrier to attack aircraft. She also features a well deck and a vehicle storage area, which can be used as additional hangar space. The vessel was launched in 2008 and commissioned on the 30th of September 2010. 123. Thailand. The aircraft carrier HMS Chakri, Narubat of the Royal Thai Navy. Current, one offshore helicopter support ship. HMS Chakri Narubat helicopter carrier. 11,400-ton STOVL carrier based on Spanish Principe de Asturias design. Commissioned in 1997. The Aviate-S Matador, Harrier Stovall fighter wing, mostly inoperable by 1999. 124 was retired from service without replacement in 2006. 125 as of 2010. The ship is used for helicopter operations and for disaster relief. 126. Turkey. TCG Anadolu Elfro at the Bosporus Strait during the naval parade for celebrating the centenary of the Turkish Republic on the 29th of October 2023. Current. TCG Anadolu is a 27,079-ton amphibious assault ship LHD outfitted as drone carrier of the Turkish Navy that can be configured as a 24,660-ton VSTOL aircraft carrier. 127 construction began on the 30th of April 2016 by Sedef Shipbuilding Inc. at their Istanbul shipyard. 128-129 TCG Anadolu was commissioned with a ceremony on the 10th of April 2023. 130-131. The construction was sister ship, to be named TCG Trakya, is currently being planned by the Turkish Navy. 130-133. The Sikorsky S-7 No-B, Seahawk and the Bella H-1 Super Cobra are the two main types of helicopters used on TCG Anadolu, with the occasional use of CH-47 Chinook helicopters of the Turkish Army during military exercises and operations. 134. The AH-1W Super Cobras will eventually be complemented and replaced by the Thai T-929 Attack II. 135. The jet-powered, low-observable drone Bayraktar Mayas-Kazalalmo, 131-136, 137, and the male UAV Bayraktar TB31, 138-139-140 are TUCAVs that are specifically designed and manufactured by Baykar Technologies to be used on TCG Anadolu. 141. The maiden flight of Tyanka 3, also part of Project Mayas, a jet-powered, flying wing type UCAV with stealth technology, was successfully completed on the 28th of December 2023. 140-143-144. On the 19th of November 2024, Baykar Bayraktar TB3 UCAV successfully took off from the flight deck of TCG Anadolu and landed on the ship. 145-146. It was the first time a fixed-wing unmanned aircraft of this size and class had successfully landed on a short runway landing helicopter dock without the use of an arresting gear. 148-146, 147. Future. Main article. Mujim-class aircraft carrier. On the 3rd of January 2024, the Turkish government approved the plan for the design and construction of a larger aircraft carrier, 149 named the Mujim class. 150. On the 15th of February 2024, the Design and Projects Office of the Turkish Navy announced that it will be a Stober aircraft carrier with an overall length of 285 meters, 935 feet, 150 beam of 72 meters to 236 feet, 150 draft of 10.1 meters 33 feet, 150 and displacement of 60,000 tons, 150. It is to have a COGAG 150 propulsion system and a maximum speed of more than 25 knots 29 miles per hour. 46 kilometers per hour, 150. The construction of the first Mujim-class aircraft carrier began on the 2nd of January 2025, 151-152. The first Mujim-class aircraft carrier is being built at the Istanbul Naval Shipyard, 151-152. United Kingdom. a Merlin HN-2AEW on HMS Queen Elizabeth's flight deck. Current, 280,600 ton est. Full load 153 Queen Elizabeth class STOVL carriers, which operate the F-35 Lightning II. HMS Queen Elizabeth was commissioned in December 2017, 150 for, and HMS Prince of Wales in December 2019. Queen Elizabeth undertook her first operational deployment in 2021. 155 each Queen Elizabeth class ship is able to operate around 40 aircraft during peacetime operations and is thought to be able to carry up to 72 at maximum capacity. 156. As of the end of April 2020, 18 F-35B aircraft had been delivered to the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force. Full operating capability for the UK's carrier strike capability had been planned for 2023 2 squadrons, or 20 for jets operating from one carrier. 157. The longer-term aim remains for the ability to conduct a wide range of air operations and support amphibious operations worldwide from both carriers. By 2026, 157 they form the central part of the UK Carrier Strike Group. The Queen Elizabeth-class ships are expected to have service lives of 50 years. 158. United States, USS Enterprise CVN-80, the third U.S. Navy carrier to bear the name, is a Gerald R. Ford-class carrier under construction as of 2025 and is expected to enter service in 2028. Current, 11 Catabar carriers, all nuclear power. Nimitz class, 10 101,000 ton, 333 meter long 1,092 feet fleet carriers, the first of which was commissioned in 1975. A Nimitz class carrier is powered by 2 nuclear reactors, providing steam to first steam turbines. Gerald R. Ford class, 100,000 ton, 337 meter long 1,106 feet fleet carrier. The lead of the class Gerald R. Ford came into service in 2017, with another 9 planned to replace the aging Nimitz-class ships. 9 amphibious assault ships carrying vehicles, marine fighters, attack and transport helicopters, and landing craft with STOVL fighters for close air support CAS and combat air patrol CAP. America class, a class of 45,000-ton amphibious assault ships. Although the first 2 ships in this class, Flight 0, do not have well decks, all subsequent ships Flight I are to have well decks. 2 ships are currently in service out of a planned 11 ships. Ships of this class can have a secondary mission as a light aircraft carrier with 20 AV-8D Harrier II, and in the future the F-35B Lightning II aircraft after unloading their Marine Expeditionary Unit. Wasp class, a class of 41,000-ton amphibious assault ships. Members of this class have been used in wartime in their secondary mission as light carriers with 20 to 25 AV-8BS after unloading their Marine Expeditionary Unit. 7 ship currently in service of an original 8, with 1 lost to fire. Future, the current U.S. fleet of Nimitz-class carriers will be followed into service and in some cases replaced by the Gerald R. Ford class. It is expected that the ships will be more automated in an effort to reduce the amount of funding required to maintain and operate the vessels. The main new features are implementation of electromagnetic aircraft launch system MAMLs, which replaces the old steam catapults and unmanned aerial vehicles. 159. In terms of future carrier developments, Congress has discussed the possibility of accelerating the phasing out of 1 or more Nimitz-class carriers, postponing or canceling the procurement of CVN-81 and CVN-82, or modifying the purchase contract. 160. Following the deactivation of USS Enterprise in December 2012, the U.S. fleet comprised 10 fleet carriers, but that number increased back to 11 with the commissioning of Gerald R. Ford in July 2017. The House Armed Services Sea Power Subcommittee on the 24th of July 2007 recommended 7 or 8 new carriers on average for years. However, the debate has deepened over budgeting for the $14.5 billion plus $12 billion for development and research. For the 100,000-ton Gerald R. Ford-class carrier estimated service 2017 compared to the smaller $2 billion 45,000-ton America-class amphibious assault ships, which are able to deploy squadrons of F-35BS. The first of this class, USS America, is now in active service with another, USS Tripoli, and 9 more are planned. 161-162. In a report to Congress in February 2018, the Navy stated it intends to maintain a 12 CVN force as part of its 30-year acquisition plan.